Hey guys, so in this video, I want to talk about OpenAI's new model, their latest model, GPT-5, and some of the things that I've noticed about it, some of the behavioral characteristics I like about it, and some of the things that need improvement. I'm going to give you my experience as a developer that have over 20 years of experience building real world software applications, some of the challenges I've experienced with other models. Currently, my daily driver in terms of LLM has been Claude 4.0, and it's been phenomenal in multiple areas. The problem I've experienced with Claude is that I tend to run out of context and the model would abruptly stop and restart. That being said, outside of those limitations, Claude is extremely consistent, and I've been able to significantly improve productivity with the Claude model building .NET applications. I'm going to show you in this video how to use the latest models while building a .NET application. I'm a diehard Visual Studio fan, not Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio. However, Visual Studio is not the best place to be building your application in terms of working with these large language models, LLM, etc. As a result, I'm going to show you, stick around in this video, I'll show you how you could actually work with Visual Studio, get the power of Visual Studio, but also get the latest models and be able to do your work. I just want to give you some overall, my first impression about the model in general. So first of all, I will say hands down that this model is definitely an improvement over the previous ones. Now, say what you want about it. There's been a lot of hate and a lot of confusion about what this model is and how it's supposed to perform. And frankly, I'll say this for the people that are in this industry and following these LLMs, we've gotten so numb to the capabilities of these models that when something like GPT-5 drops, and as impressive as it is and the capabilities that it has, it's suddenly not enough. And I think that's just a byproduct of the fact that the first hype, the novelty of the LLMs is gone. And now we're into the weeds and only getting small percentage gains. The problem that I'm observing, at least in broader sense of the internet, is that those small incremental gains are being lost in the capabilities of the model. I just want to talk specifically about the actual capabilities and encourage you as a developer, somebody trying to figure out how these LLM fit into your workflow, to just use the models. Don't get caught up in the hype. Don't get caught up in all of the buzz that's going online and chat conversations. At the end of the day, you have to evaluate whether these models are good enough for you to get your stuff done. And that's what I've been doing. Obviously, I'm paying attention to the news and what's going on with these models. But what I'm really focused on more than any single thing else is spending as much time as I possibly can getting a feel for the model. And the way how I like to describe it is, if you were working with a coworker at an office or even a friend, you would have a vibe. It's really why vibe coding makes sense for this terminology. Vibe coding makes sense for this particular thing, because there's a certain feeling you have when you're working with a friend. And if you guys are vibing correctly, then you will probably be able to be more productive. And so if you don't have a good sense of how the model is behaving, I think you'll get caught up in the numbers and the fact that the model is not as impressive as it should. And Grok is a better model. Gemini Pro is a better model. And then you just kind of lost like the core mission of what these models, at least at this particular stage, is trying to do. So anyway, that's just my rant about, and my just personal advice on what I think you should be doing. With that, I'm going to give you my overall experience and thought process about how I've been thinking about things and show you where the gains are. So first thing I'll say right off top is that the OpenAI model GPT-5 has been very impressive in terms of the improvements that is made, I'd say, from 4.1, etc. In fact, I stopped using 4.1 now because it's not a good model. It works perfectly fine and it's actually very good at giving solid answers. If I use it in the context of an IDE, Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, I find it just doesn't do a good job of finding the related files to make proper code changes. In other words, tool calling was broken. I can say without a doubt that this GPT-5 model significantly has improved the process of doing tool calling. And I'll show you some real world example of that. The other thing that I think is impressive with this model is that it tends to stick more on task with what it is trying to accomplish and not veer off and do all kinds of craziness. That's something I've definitely seen with Claude 4. And I think Claude 4 has just been exceptional in that regards. GPT-5, I would say for sure, has caught up on that particular path. I mean, this is a new application that I'm working on, so it's only approaching maybe about 14 or 15,000 lines of code. But you start to get a really large code base. It's very, very important that the models stick to the task. That's number one. And number two, it can trace the related files or classes to make changes accordingly if you're doing refactoring, etc. And so far, GPT-5 has been on point with that. If you read the headlines, OpenAI scrambles to update GPT-5 after user revolts, right? You go to GPT-5 overdue, overhyped, and overwhelming, and that's not the worst of it, right? It goes on, and it's a lot of negative. This guy here was a popular post on Reddit, and he's like, Claude is amazing, GPT-5 is all about lowering costs, etc. And that's 100% true, right? Like GPT-5 is a significantly better model from a cost standpoint, that much better than Claude from a coding standpoint. In fact, I might argue that Claude is better in some regards, but I'm seeing some very clear value in this model. Number one, speed. For sure, it's faster than Claude, and it's definitely doing as good a job as Claude. And I think as a developer, you have to get away from this hype and start focusing on the facts altogether. You go through all of the threads, and most people are saying, that they miss the old models, etc. And I want to basically stay away from that, because I think if you get caught up in that conversation, you're going to miss the core intention. Okay, so with that, I've rambled enough about the model. Let me show you what I'm building and what I'm going to give a head-to-head test between GPT-5 and Claude so you could see how they both handle the task. I have an example here where I'm using Twilio to send out verification codes on a mobile phone. That's basically what this part of the app I'm working on is supposed to do. The application I built is working. This conversation is not really about what I'm building. It's more about the process. The application is sending out codes. However, it has a public API. And what I'd like to have sort of an internal SDK style API that I can use as a class library to send verification code. So that's basically the goal of the task. And again, the details is not about the application, it's about the process. It's a .NET application, so I'll show you right off the top. So again, don't get caught up on the details. So this is basically a post request that can be made to send a post. You put in a phone number and it would initiate a text message and send a code, right? And it has a verification. Now, what I want to do is just make sure that this application has sort of like a SDK so I could kind of use it for internal stuff. Now, this is Visual Studio. Visual Studio does not have GPT 5.0. If I go to Visual Studio Code and I open up the exact same project, GPT-5, as you can see, is in that list as a preview. Also, Claude is there. So with that being said, this is the prompt that I have. Don't get caught up too much on the details of the prompt. Here's the prompt. It's a very vague prompt because this is how I would normally write a prompt. It's not the most properly crafted prompt. It's just, I'm just hacking away and texting almost like I'm texting to a human being what I want them to do. And I'm just expecting the model to do it. That's the level of engagement I've been trying to throw at the model to see how loose can I be or how structured do I need to be in my prompts. Here I have helped me make some API decisions. I currently have an API, which I just showed you before. However, I want to be able to send an SMS from within the application. Logic, I basically give it an idea of where I want it to go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that as a foundation. We're going to do that in GPT-5 and we're going to do it in Claude. So at least we have some head-to-head comparison and I show you exactly how the model is behaving. Let me just do this. I'm just going to check in this change here so that you can see exactly what changes are being made for both. I'm going to create a new branch. So at least you can see the GPT-5 version and then you can see the, oops. Okay, so we're just going to go check out GPT-5. I already had this GPT-5 here, so I'm just going to do GPT-5 new. Okay. And then we'll let it go. The first thing I've noticed is that it's doing a significantly better job of picking up my Copilot instructions file, README file, etc. Now, if you don't know what these things are, I have a video about it previously in the channel. Maybe I'll link to it so that you could understand how you need to set up your application and your structure of your prompts in order to get the best results. This prompt here, first of all, it'll pick up, let me show you what my Copilot file is. It has a full detailed architecture of the entire application from end to end, including sample examples. Then it has an SDR that gives us very specific details of software. It's got software design record, software requirements documents. And then it has some things about storage and email settings, etc. And even a task list, and they're all linked to the Copilot instructions, so it knows how to find those documents. So very, very important. Again, if you need more clarification on that, watch my previous video on vibe coding as a boss. I will give you some details about it. GPT-5 has been significantly better in that it pulls this information, and if you notice, it's reading significantly more files before it starts the job. This is the thing it wasn't doing before. It was not spending the time upfront to get a proper evaluation of the project, what's already done, what changes I need to make, which is how you would do this as a human being. Like if you were a human being approaching this problem, you wouldn't just start making changes. You would come up with a generic plan on what you need to accomplish. Now it's dropping some basic implementation details. The thing that I'm noticing that it didn't do this time, normally it comes up with, here's what I'm going to do. In the past, at least over the weekend that I was working with it, it was doing this quite a bit. It was coming up with a long to-do list of things, and it would tell me if I wanted to proceed or if I wanted to think. That being said, it didn't do it this time, but that's okay. The other part is that it is trying to build a project, and this is much, much faster than Claude. I'll show you how Claude has been behaving with this, and it's much, much faster. Now, the only thing is, see, if you notice here, it tried to build, it got a bunch of errors and it stopped. This has been the issue where I think Claude still has an advantage, because when Claude finds these errors, he'll actually try to continue. And we'll do that because, like I said, we're going to do that prompt, exact same prompt in Claude in a bit. But however, what I'm going to do is hand it over these errors. And so I told you, I promised I was going to show you this. Instead of doing these errors here, I would flip over to Visual Studio itself, the father version of Visual Studio Daddy, and I would go to error message here, and I would actually do a build, because Visual Studio is significantly better at handling and dealing with .NET code and doing proper assessment. Now, not that you can't do that here. In fact, for sake of time, I'm going to do it this. I'm going to copy this and put this error, because it should have picked up these errors, but it's not. So I'm going to copy that and paste it. Okay. So I'm going to pick that up. However, generally speaking, what I would do is I'd actually come in here to Visual Studio, like I said, where I could see the errors properly. These are the ones that I would have a problem with. And what I would do is copy these and then do copy row. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want it to actually pull in, and I'll show you what that looks like just at the bottom here. Is it actually pull in the line number and every single thing else, so that you could give the model proper context in terms of how to solve the problem. Generally speaking, what I've noticed with the GPT-5 is I do have to tell it about these errors a little bit more than Claude. Claude seems to pay more attention to what's going on in the console and update itself properly. That's not always the case, but I find that if it runs for a significant amount of time, it'll have to do that. So interestingly enough, it came up with this summary. And you see here, what I've noticed that it'll do this like next steps, which is optional, register SMS deal. But my point is, it hasn't actually fixed those problems. And I'll confirm that in a sec here, because I'm going to do another build and we'll see if those build errors go away. Okay, so my build actually took a really long time to run, but it actually did successfully do all of the changes and there's no build errors. So basically 2 prompts in order for me to get to a state of not having any errors. That being said though, let's see what it actually did. So it made some changes to, and again, the focus is not on the code here. It made one single code change and created a new backgrounds communication message file. The problem is that it actually didn't so it did that, but there's no implementation of it. Let me just see. So SMS sender. And again, this is where Visual Studio really shines, because it just has a better tool for this stuff. My computer's just been running really slow lately. So it did do exactly what I asked it to do. it did create a service. That service does allow me to send a message request. And let's see here. So yeah, message details. And basically, this is a fairly trivial example, but the point is it was able to understand what I asked, read the instructions, do the work, and give me a proper code. Before with GPT-4, this was not happening. I might do a full end-to-end test where I compare all three of the models. But even with something like this, I was running into problems. I don't know, maybe your mileage might vary, but that was definitely for sure with me. So what I'll do is we're going to leave it as this. We did 2 prompts. So I just want to be fair to the other model, right? We got some errors. I'll check this in. Okay, I just checked in that code, and now we're going to try to do the exact same prompt with Claude. So we're going to change that to Claude 4. I'm going to copy the exact same prompt. Okay, so I can't emphasize this enough. The goal of the prompt is to show a real world use case of how I would be dealing with just thing. Now, interestingly enough, this is what Claude has done. So just right off the top, so it did pull in the exact same set of files, pretty much. It's now telling me, this is the cool thing. I've noticed this consistently with Claude of recently. I haven't noticed this before, but it's actually given me some overall architecture. It's like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I have. This is what your API service looks like right now. This is how it's set up. This is the recommended endpoint. Oh, you know what? I take that back. I'm on the ask, not on the agent. So we got to run that again. That being said, though, that actually has been a cool thing that I've noticed that Claude will do for sure. To be fair, we don't want to do word for word, apples for apples. So let's just do it this way. Okay, so with Claude, we sent off the exact same prompt. It did pick up the exact same set of files, and that's because, again, in my Copilot instructions file, we have that instructions, and it also knows how to find the other files that are sitting in docs folder. See here, it has a reference. No, sorry, somewhere in here, there's a reference to those actual files itself. So it knows where to find them. Okay. So with that, it's doing about the same thing. The only difference in my observation so far is that Claude is a little bit slower. In fairness, I would rather the model go a little bit slower and get me proper results rather than going too fast. I'd say it's about on average the same thing in terms of speed. So we'll see how long it takes for Claude to go through this and get me some results. So here's where Claude definitely shines. It's been very consistent at this. I've seen it do this multiple times where it comes up with a plan. It says, hey, perfect. Now I have a comprehensive understanding of your current SMS infrastructure. Let me create a comprehensive plan. And it's very consistent in delivering this plan. For whatever reason, on the test that I ran previously, it did not do this. And the thing that I like with Claude is that it actually formats the task of what it needs to do. What I found with the GPT-5 model, when it was doing it, it was all standard text. So it looks like comments. Even though it would put like numbers, there's no bold or icons or any type of stuff. And I think this is actually a really nice, small but subtle touch that Claude is doing just to add some readability to the action plan that is going to be implementing. So also the other thing that I've noticed about with Claude is that you see it does some implementation, it then does some checks, then it'll come back and try to reassess where it's at, and then it'll try to continue fixing. So it does a much more iterative approach. The reason why I've been consistently sticking with Claude, because it's very slow, but it's consistent. It'll try to, okay, I've done this. Now let me see what's the problem. I've done this. Let me try to evaluate. Okay, looks like we got some errors. Now I've done this, and it'll continue to keep doing that. The problem with Claude is that the context window is much smaller. So for a task like this, that it's not a trivial task in the sense that this is a fairly large code base. It's not a massive code base, but it's decent sized. And so it has to go through quite a bit to find these files. As a result, you tend to hit a cap because it's thoughtful in its process of evaluating the thing. And here, if you notice, it says here, I see the issue because it's done some stuff and there's some issues with refining. That's where GPT-5, on the other hand, it got things done and implemented the first try. That being said, though, it did not do a better job. I'll show you that in a bit, of separating the code between the different things. If you notice here with Claude, the files are separate. So it has an SMS service, it has an SMS model, it has an ISMS. So it's doing a lot of separation. Now, here's where Claude hits its limitation. Because it was running for such a long time, Visual Studio keeps prompting me, hey, are you sure you want to continue to iterate? I have to keep clicking that continue button, which is not necessarily a big issue. By the way, in another video, I'll show you how you can actually extend that time. Because right now, I think I have it on the max, which is about 15. We'll turn for a bit, evaluate, and then come back to the drawing board. So you don't have to keep pressing that continue all the time. It's really annoying in Visual Studio. The good news about this way of doing things is that I find that VS Code is generous with the plans they have. I've upgraded to the $40 a month plan, and it's very consistent and stable. I haven't been hit with quotas. In the early days, I was getting hit with quotas. And what I did is I switched over to Visual Studio Code, the Insider edition. And that was how I was able to work around some of the quota limitations, because the Insider, they want the feedback. So they're not necessarily limiting you as much. With that, we're almost done with Claude. I'm going to let it run for a bit here. Okay, so Claude is now doing the exact same thing. It's actually building the file. So it's trying to build a file. It noticed that it found an issue, circular dependency, and it's going to try to fix that. This is where Claude definitely shines. I've noticed it's just very consistent about at least trying to evaluate, figure out if I have a successful build, and then trying to execute it. Whereas the GPT, now again, it's in preview, so there might be some limitations in the tool calling abilities. But at its current state right now, which is only 5 days since GPT was announced, the tool calling capabilities doesn't seem to be as robust, and it is marked as preview in VS Code. That's something to think about. But if you notice, it has created more files. More files doesn't necessarily mean better, but it's doing a more thorough job of at least separating the concerns, whereas with GPT-5, it just kind of dumped every single thing together. Now, that hasn't been always the case. I've noticed it has been consistent about creating more files, but in that particular use case that I gave it, it lumped everything together. Still got to work in code, but it's just that every single thing is just under less files. Whereas Claude is spending more time to step through all the different files and try to put things into the correct order. According to my instructions, my Copilot does tell it to follow those instruction guidelines and make sure that it puts files in the right location. I'm going to let it run through, but I think it's pretty much coming to the end. So there you go. So Claude is now officially finished. It took way longer, probably a good 10 minutes longer. However, it actually built the code successfully because it ran into a few errors and it was able to build the code successfully altogether, right? See here, we had some errors and then it was able to build the code successfully. If I go back to Visual Studio, I can reload that exact same project and do a rebuild. And I'm pretty certain I'm going to get a successful day as well. So here's my verdict altogether. Number one is the hype is just exactly that, hype. GPT-5, OpenAI, Claude, Sonnet, DeepSeek, Llama, you name it. All of these guys are paid to do one thing, which is to tell you that their model is the best. As a developer, whether you're a .NET developer, JavaScript developer, Node.js, Java developer, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you have to spend the time with these tools to figure out whether they're going to work for you or not. And if they are going to work for you, then you need to really invest in understanding how the model is behaving under circumstances. That's my takeaway. Again, not trying to be an expert on this, just share my real world experience. Hopefully you got some value from this entire video. If you have, feel free to like it, subscribe. I talk about AI tools. I'm also talking about Cloudflare, .NET, sort of my journey towards sort of an AI world. So with that, I'll see you in another video. Have yourself a wonderful day.